So Monster Hunter Rise is finally available for the Nintendo Switch, and we've had a good few hours of early impressions on this thing now, and we thought we'd give you our thoughts on how it runs, what it's like to play, and whether or not you should pick it up in this very early stages. We will have a full review coming in the next couple of weeks, but we want to be able to spend some actual time really playing it, getting to grips with it, and just seeing how well it compares to something like Monster Hunter World, which, by the way, we absolutely loved. So when I saw the initial trailers for Monster Hunter Rise and saw the announcement for it, it just struck me as a bit odd that it was going to be coming from the Nintendo Switch, because everything that they showed off looked pretty damned fantastic. The graphics looked amazing, the performance looked amazing, and overall it looked like it was a step up from Monster Hunter World, and something that the Nintendo Switch just wouldn't really be able to pull off. But here I am today, able to say that those things that were shown off absolutely have been pulled off like some kind of Nintendo magic. So first impressions are very promising. When I first booted up the game, you get into your character creation and you just start seeing some of those early sort of in-game cutscenes. Things look absolutely superb, and I've mostly played this handheld so far, and I have had literally no performance issues. The graphics look absolutely superb, and I was not disappointed in the slightest. One thing that is really apparent about this game is just how good things in the background look, and that might sound weird, but I remember playing Monster Hunter World, and there were a few times we'd be sat talking to somebody, and just in the background it looked like a 2D background that had been rendered, and it didn't look particularly detailed. Well, with Monster Hunter Rise, things look really good, and it just looks so much better and more detailed than something like Monster Hunter World. For the Nintendo Switch, it's probably one of the best and nicest looking games that I've actually seen so far and played, and one of the best things about it is the fact that the performance doesn't really seem to take a dip. So diving into an actual monster hunt, and when you get into the combat side of things don't really take a dip, and that's where I thought things would start to fall apart. So when I started it up, it was just a case of it looks great at the moment, walking around the village and interacting with characters, or looks fantastic and performs well now, but what's going to happen when I actually get into a hunt? And I'm very happy to say that the performance is exceptionally good. I haven't had any frame rate dips or anything like that, and like I said, I've been mostly playing it in handheld, so it handles it extremely well. For anybody who played Monster Hunter World, you will be immediately familiar with the way this game plays. It looks very similar, and aesthetically everything is very stylized in the same sort of way. Combat handles pretty much identically to it, although it is more vertical now because you have the ability to zip all over the place, which is a nifty little thing. And you can also ride different monsters. You can ride your new doggy friend, which is very interesting, and it definitely makes getting around the map a lot nicer. And different monsters, if you stun them and stuff like that, you can jump onto the backs and you use your I think the wire bugs they're called, to basically control the monster, and it means you can go toe to toe with other monsters on these big beasties, which just adds a new dynamic to the game. It's very similar to anything that's come before, and the fact you go around, you gather your different resources, you harvest your different monsters as well, you accept quests in a very similar way, and things just work extremely nicely. You can also recruit different palicos and different buddies, which just kind of gives you a different dynamic. So my buddy, for example, started off as a healer, but if I wanted to switch out to a combat-based one, I could do recruitment for that. So it just adds a slightly different way to play, and you can mix things up to your play style, which is, again, really interesting. Now, it's not all smooth sailing, and if you are on the lookout for different things that they've cut to make this perform as well as it does, you can see them. There's certain things in regards to things like the shadows and the lighting textures that just look a little bit odd. The shadows just don't look natural at all, and where the shadows strike the characters' faces, for example, it's almost pixelated and grainy and just doesn't look right. Hopefully something that will be addressed in the future, but you never know. And certain things with regards to the lighting, where it strikes the different character models and stuff like that, it just starts to get a little bit odd and just doesn't look quite right. Also as well, animation-wise, there's not quite as many animations, which is, in my opinion, a good thing. When you harvest from things in Monster Hunter World, you seem to repeat the same thing over and over, and there's definitely more hand movement and stuff like that regarding mining, harvesting from bone piles. But in Monster Hunter Rise, there definitely seems to be far fewer of those. And the same can be said for interacting with other characters as well. So if you go to interact with a character in the village, you press A, instead of kind of having a smooth transition into seeing them and stuff like that, it pretty much just cuts from what you were doing at the moment straight into the text box or the interaction menu. It's very similar when you're actually in conversation with other characters as well. There's very little in terms of narration, and there's a few one-liners that are in there, and then it mostly cuts to text boxes. And I guess that's just so they can cram it all in and just make it work a little bit nicer. And to be fair, these are relatively welcome changes in my opinion anyway. And it might not even be anything to do with performance, because let's face it, Monster Hunter World dragged at some points where you're just forced to sit through loads and loads of narration and content, and it's just a bit frustrating. So those cuts definitely help with the performance, and they certainly make it play a little bit nicer and smoother. The only frustrating thing I've found so far is that in certain menus, when you try to use the left thumbstick, it just doesn't work. You always have to use the D-pad. So for example, at the end of a hunt, if you want to navigate down to take all or sell all, you have to navigate with the D-pad. And when you've been mostly using the left thumbstick to navigate around everything, and then suddenly you go into a screen that just doesn't allow for it, it feels weird, and I don't know why that's there or why it's not there in this case. Hopefully it's something that gets addressed in the future. It's not a game-breaking bug or anything like that, but from a quality of life issue, when you go from using the left thumbstick to navigate pretty much everything, and then you go into a certain menu screen, it just is a bit jarring and just frustrating. So on the whole, so far Monster Hunter Rise has been an absolute dream to play. It looks absolutely gorgeous, it performs incredibly well, and I'm using one of the very original Nintendo Switches that came out on the market. So this thing, it doesn't have any of the slightly upgraded processors or the newer hardware, and it runs it extremely well. It has blown me away how good Monster Hunter Rise is compared to what I was expecting it to be, and it definitely performs way above my expectations, looks above my expectations, and there looks like there's so much to do in this game that I can't wait to give it my full attention and bring our full review to you in the future. So let us know in the comments, are you picking up Monster Hunter Rise? And if so, what's the thing you're most looking forward to playing? Also, what weapon are you going to be choosing? I've gone longsword just because it's what I'm used to, but I should probably mix it up a little bit in the future. In the meantime, we hope you've enjoyed this content, and if you have, hit the subscribe button and come along for some more awesome content in the future. We'll see you next time, stay safe, and goodbye.